Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the second edition of Tashkil'. Tashkil is the flagship event of IIT Guwahati's Design Club Whitespace, where we invite established alumni from various fields of design to address the budding design aspirants about topics that can help them explore opportunities that design offers, both academically and in a career perspective. So, for today's talk, we have Shobhan. Hi, Shobhan. Um, Shobhan did his bachelor's in design from IIT Guwahati in 2011 before pursuing a master in arts in information experience design from Royal College of Arts in 2016. And Shobhan functions as a designer and an artist who works to make technology and experiences multi-modal, humane, and emotionally relatable. He helps investigate develop, communicate these ideas by working comfortably at every stage of a project from research and prototyping to design, engineering, and production. He'll be enlightening us with his knowledge and experience by addressing the topic. It's okay to not have a career.
All right. Like when I hear someone read that so-called bio that I tried writing, I realize that it absolutely makes no sense. There's too many words, and it's very hard to really wrap oneself around it. But that's probably in keeping with the theme that it's very hard for me at least. Maybe many people are good at it, but it's very hard for me to narrow down very clearly what a person is. In this case, the person is me. But and I recently went to a wedding, and everyone keeps asking me, so what do you do? And if I ask them, they're like, I'm a lawyer, and I work in civil construction, and I make buildings and stuff like that. But as a designer, you're kind of screwed. You say designer, अच्छा आप कपड़े बनाते हो, right? Oh, अच्छा आप interior design, furniture बनाते हो क्या? And you're like, no, अच्छा you must be working as a UX designer, app बनाते हो. And I'm like, not really, because these are just ways of expressing yourself. There are many ways a person can express, and not always in design, especially. I've found that a lot of your personality seeps into your work, and you guys will notice over the next about 3 or 4 years. You will notice. I don't need to point out, but there'll be a lot more write-ups about morality and about moral stance and about bringing a personality to the table. There have been sort of noises in this starting to happen about this year onwards. But so I can just sort of say, like, I've been feeling that for a long time, that my work, my personal life, etc., are not disconnected. So depending on who I'm talking to, I might say I'm a wannabe swimmer, or I'm a failed writer, or something like that. And it's interesting because you don't allow a person to narrow you down to something that's small as just your career or your profession. Doesn't work everywhere, but I think design gives you a great opportunity to blow it open and not give the standard answers that you would normally expect. Having said that, let's just sort of dive in. So the key word I think that came about here was career, right? And I'm gonna try sometimes to ask open-ended questions in the beginning, and if I get a response, great. If I don't, it's okay, I'll answer it on my own. But to different people, what does career mean, right? In the dictionary definition, it's kind of like the words that come to mind may be like carrier or something that carries, or like a vehicle. I think that's the etymology of the word, where it comes from. But what is it for you guys to have a career? What happens to a person who doesn't have a career? Any thoughts? Anyone? What if you don't have a career? Stunned silence. You all can speak up, and there's no correct answer here because I clearly don't know what a career is. But does anyone know anyone who doesn't have a career, or do you guys have pressures from your families to like, you need to build a career path? Is that something that you'll hear often? You do?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first point, sir is not a cool term. Shobhan, person, human, right? Sir, sire, British, overlords, colonialism, etc., etc. Throw it out. Maybe your faculty members still demand that they call you sir. If your seniors are still demanding that they call you sir, then I'm a bit sad, because we worked very hard in my time to make seniors and juniors stop calling each other sir and ma'am. But you can just call me Shobhan. So okay, so you guys have pressure. the thing that I can come to is about what and why, right? A lot of stuff we take for granted in our lives. We were told that you need to be first in class, or you are told that, hey, if you score really good marks and you're an intelligent child, and it's really interesting that we live in an age where we can start questioning these things, because what is intelligence? Is it just bookish knowledge? Is there something that's emotional intelligence or social intelligence that's better? As you'll progress, somebody will tell you that, hey man, if you want to get into management, your people skills are really good. And then I'm like, 1 second, people skills, right? I mean, there was no course on that. I went to a college where the ratio of boys into girls was so messed up that most of the boys graduating were psychosexually stunted, right? It took me many years to overcome a lot of the prejudices that I might have experienced, the homophobia, the kind of what's the word? Anyway, you get the point. Chauvinism, one may say. So that's really not good for people skills, right? I mean, if I had a manager who's a woman, I'm screwed. My passive aggressiveness is going to show through right there. So the ideas that we've grown up with are very problematic, and we have an opportunity to question them. Why do you have a career? Why do you have a 9 to 5? Why do you have a 5-day work week? Um, so instead of going into too many details, my sense is that if you have a career, you're convenient to manage. People know what you've done, people know what you want to do, and people know what they can get out of you. If you do make changes, they'll be incremental and sort of predictable. So to me, I see a career as a control mechanism. And yeah, you have a good career, you'll progress, you'll do really cool stuff. But there are questions being asked now in the industry about what large organizations that can offer great salaries are actually doing, right? The number of class action lawsuits, the whole shenanigan. I don't need to say this. So there are questions that you can ask. I'm not saying that we'll be able to break the system or move out of it, but it's worth questioning, why is there a career? Why do I need to have a 9 to 5? 9 to 5 was enforced on mining workers, right? Low paid. When and that's still enforced today is just ridiculous and blows my mind. I can't remember having a 9 to 5, thankfully, ever in my life. So I'm thankful for that. I can take time off anytime I want. I can work when I want, and I can choose what to prioritize. It comes at a cost, but it's a different way of life. And I'm kind of hoping, right, that what your career is and why you're expected to have a career, these are things that you will begin to critically examine. Not much might change. You guys might still live your lives as you are expected to. Many people have financial constraints where they really need to start earning and progress in terms of salary. They cannot have massive changes in salary. They cannot just leave everything and then wait for a freelance job and then build it up from scratch. So there are constraints people live with, but be mindful of the constraints and always within those constraints question. So in this talk, I can only talk about my career. I cannot tell you what's the ideal career. I have former classmates. I think you guys have spoken with Manu and stuff like that. He was a junior of mine, who built incredible careers, right? And they're doing fabulous work, and they're holding, well, that's the only way I put it. They're doing fabulous work. You also have Safina, who's probably gone into academia and research and done really cool work. From my class, you have Shamik and Rohit, who were designers. You should probably invite them, by the way, at some point. But they've built some really good careers out of it. There was also Aditya. I think we have 5 of us: Aditya, Shamik, Rohit. There was just Meet also and me. Each of us has gone on a different path, and each of these are careers and non-careers, but we built interesting lives out of it. So I will be able to talk about my career, so to speak, which I think was a non-career, because it sort of died so many times, and maybe since I obviously enjoy rambling a lot, I can tell you stories from how the whole thing just basically crashed, and then where I had to restart it, and maybe was it good, was it not good. We can see. It's been an opportunity for me also to reflect on it. The first one I dive into, okay, wait, just breathe, pause. Does that sort of make sense? I'm just trying to make people think about what a career is. And a career is like a logical progression of incremental steps. You become a junior designer, and then you become a designer, and then a mid-senior designer, and a senior designer. The company knows what to expect of you. When you look for jobs, you have to always tell that, you know what, I am used to be a mid-senior designer, so now I want to be a senior designer. You can't really go in there and be like, yeah, I used to be a graphic designer, now I want to make electronics. So please let me use your ANSYS systems and whatnot. But I was lucky. I got to do that. I got a lot of people who trusted me, who were foolish enough to trust it sometimes. And I think the possibility exists. So I'm hoping this allows you to think in those directions. Okay, the first one. When people ask me, what are you, what do you do? My usual go-to answer is failed graphic designer, right? As in Guwahati, which is the trend, and it's ridiculous that even 10 years later that is still the dominant trend. It's also kind of sad because the UI design is kind of saturated and it's kind of lacking in ideas. One would have imagined that academia is producing students who are thinkers and not just doers. But we are intent on creating people who fit into the machinery and can be made to do stuff without questioning it. So UI design was what people wanted to do. UX, UI design. Back then you had Sketch and you had Photoshop and Illustrator. Today you've got Figma and you've got InVision and stuff like that. These are just tools. It's a bit like saying you had a screwdriver and now you've got a screwdriver with a slight motor attached onto it. It's fundamentally you're screwing holes, right? Not really very different. So in college, I tried making posters, techniques. I think some of you guys are involved. This was a plagiarized poster. I didn't even know it, but it was. I was too young to realize it. I saw somebody who put up some images. The type exercise, and they just had all the images, and I was like, oh, that looks cool. Maybe I can combine and make a poster of it. First graphic design exploration, but it was fun. The poster was a hit. It was great. There was an entrepreneurship society at IIT Guwahati, so uska logo banane ka koshish kiya. So there was a conference, so realized that entrepreneurship is win versus risk. So we did some stuff and we made the conference up, and it was fun. लोग आए बाहर से, बहुत मजा आया, identity बनाने मिला. I got into the industry and I tried keeping up with this idea of, before I got into the industry, everyone did UI UX design, but I tried to be a graphic designer. I don't know how foolish it was, but I tried. I tried doing logos, like for there was a company which was trying to do some renewable energy. So they were called HFE. So for HFE, I tried to make like a little logo that's basically like a bulb, and when it flickers on, you see light. Right. So these were all very initial explorations, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be a cool graphic designer who will do like interactive graphic work and whatnot. It didn't work. No one in the industry wants to buy this, and they're like, Janta is not going to get it. But here, I tried. Sahara, the big scam, back then was really big. So anyway, I tried doing more logos. And I tried doing like this thing where Sahara had a motion pictures thing, and then their logo would be literally a projected screen and all that stuff. So these presentations were cool. The CEOs of the companies loved them. But in the end, they were like, हाँ पर आम जनता नहीं समझेगा तो हमको नहीं करना है. If they made a film city, I would do like, okay, your logo should be this thing that's always changing size. This is 2011. And I was told that, way man, you're way ahead of your time here. This is not what the industry wants. Okay, I said, fine, can't help it. Went, tried other stuff. Joined a graphic design studio called Co-Design. And you should look them up. Incredible work. They've done the logo for Royal Enfield, for Wildcraft bags. They've done stuff for Rupee right now and whatever. And it's really cool. So I got to work with them, and I got to do some, stuff. And usually what I realize what I'm good at is kind of engineered stuff. It's not really design as the whole really beautiful stuff. I could take a lot of information and make it neat. And I was surrounded by people who are just prodigious graphic designers, right? I mean, these guys could in their sleep create stuff that people would drool over. So I quickly realized like the word is औकात nahi hai. And it's time to accept that you will never be the best graphic designer in the world. And sort of at some point, I said, okay, fine. I have a friend. He's trying to make a startup. I can just go and work with him. I won't feel bad. I'll be the only designer. It's fine. Thoda ego ko boost milega. So he went there. It was great. It was Bangalore. It was life was great. I could rock climb about 3 days, 4 days a week in the mornings. We were a startup. We were all just boys sitting in a room jamming and making stuff. There was a bunch of engineers. So my job as a designer was essentially at night the engineers would stay up and they'd make 20 features. In the morning, the CEO would wake up and he's like, yeah, but this is too complicated. And then it was my job to say, okay, fine, ये 10 features हटा दो यहाँ से. So the life of the designer is basically when engineers, when they play with tools, make 50 million things. And the designer has to be like, yeah, but people are not really going to be able to use all of it. It's too complex. So let's just keep 3 for now. And then you have a fight. And then, like eventually somebody wins and then you have maybe 40 features. This was life. I got to make a cool logo, which was a lot of fun and all that stuff. And in the end, in about 6 months, we managed to sell the company off. We also went through a few accelerators, and Yahoo bought us. So it was great, win-win. If I had joined Yahoo, I'd have got a great pay package and returns, and in a couple of years I'd move to the States, and life would be set, right? Career. Came from graphic design, started with some UI, did some UX, had a startup, sold, like it got sold, went ahead and joined Yahoo, became a manager. Life was set, right? And good money also. Instead, what I did is I took a loan and went off to study for a master's. I just had a feeling that this whole UX UI, a lot of people are doing it and it's not really fulfilling me, and I don't want to just work on screens. Life is a lot richer. There's wood, there's metal, there's stuff. So went off to London, started a program there in 2 years. First few months, there was a project we had. So did a lot of random stuff, okay? Like work with bulbs, with food, with 3D printers and dance performers and product designers who made whistles to call birds and whatnot. A lot of fun. And this was one project where we tried to do like a little thing by which you put a camera on a hand and you move the camera over color and different tones come out. It was great. It was a good 1 or 2 week exercise. But in this project, what happened is that I had a group. We were all working. We were 4 of us, 3 product designers and 1 me. And we used to have these things called crits. Crits are like reviews. So every few days you would have somebody external to the college, or maybe somebody who runs a good company or whatever, comes and you sit with them and you explain to them what you're doing. And they might give you some feedback and you can choose to incorporate it or not. And then after a few weeks, you make a presentation, you do a demo, you actually make what you imagine should exist in the world and you demonstrate it. A lot of making, a lot of getting onto it. So you're having a crit, and they were basically telling all the ideas we have are like not really working. Oh, sorry, no. They were saying the ideas are working. And I just lost my shit, right? And you shouldn't do that. These people who are giving us a review are running studios and companies that you want to get hired to. So you don't lose your shit on them. Bad idea. So anyway, I lost my cool on the presentation and in the crit, and I was like, you know what? You guys are saying this is all great, but I think it's nonsense. And he's like, okay, you're a smart guy. We think it's great, and we've had this great studio, and we do good work. And who are you to tell us? And I'm like, well, I think it's nonsense. And they're like, okay, so do you have something better? And I said, well, I thought I'll say nonsense, and you tell me you have something better. So I sat up all night and I made something. So I made something, and they were like, oh, this is great. And then they told the whole team, why don't you guys do what he's doing? Because it seems like it's a better idea than all the stuff we've had. And it was strange, right? I lost my cool, but yet somehow the idea won through because I had conviction, right? That whatever I want to do, I will take it the whole way. After the project, I realized that they had a chat with the faculty member who was running the project and asked him about me. I had a chat with them, and about in 2 or 3 months into my degree, I was offered an internship with them. Right? We had a lot of fun on this project anyway, and we did some fun stuff. And as part of my internship, so fundamentally, I could have started working with them, and they're an art studio. See, I've come from design, engineering college. I want a career. I need some money. I've taken a massive loan, and here I was ending up with artists, right? And we are making art. My job was, because I had a visual design background, they didn't know I'd realized I failed, but they thought I can do some graphic design. And they were a very industrial design-led art studio. They worked with robots and machines and electronics and software. They didn't do visual stuff. So they said, okay, fine, you know what? You come in and you do some graphic stuff. And they had some graphic projection mapping project, and they put me onto it. I said, okay, sounds like fun. I did an internship, tried doing some stuff by which like you can stand in front of a wall and your shadows just change shape. They're weird shapes, they're unexpected, and you have no idea why it's happening, right? You can't see the whole magic being art. Tried doing stuff like this, where your shadow sort of fades in and out in strange ways. And it was fun. It was fun. Okay, 7, 8, 9 months of life. I mean, one would imagine that's a waste of time, right? But it was a lot of fun. At the end of it, they gave me a job. I couldn't take the job because I still had a degree to finish. If you're in the UK and you don't get a degree, you can't get the visa to get a job back then. So I had to finish the degree. As part of the degree, I worked with electronics and content and made stuff. Not a lot of fancy. This is very basic electrical stuff. It's not even electronics, to be honest. There's a basic microcontroller like a Raspberry Pi and some tube light starters and some power supplies. Not much to it. I worked with some graphic design where we took huge data sets and worked with a friend of mine, and we found a way to turn them into HTML, CSS, and print it as a book. Did bookbinding, and they also sort of connected all this data with the book presented. So if you see here, there's the book is here, there's a projected date, and the lights basically indicate the data from that date. I won't go into too many details, but it was just a very holistic project that involved more than just the graphic design that I was once upon a time thinking I'll make a career out of. Um, I was fun, and I was talking about serious stuff. I was talking about people getting killed in wartime, right? I was presenting it. I could in London. I could show it, and it was nice. Um, then I went back to the studio after I graduated, and I did stuff like this. We went to New York in a high-rise building, and I was a fabrication engineer for a while. I was helping make massive light installations that they created. I was making PCBs, designing the layouts for it. I was sometimes writing software for simple microcontrollers. I was working with mirrors, and I was doing stuff again to customize whatever. Right, I had a lot of fun because I could now make these little tools to help the studio explore what their artworks would look like. And again, graphic design background. They thought I can do Cinema 4D, which is kind of 3D. So sort of in all this talking, I'm just hoping that you can get a thread that at any point what I was doing was connected to what was before, but it was not just one step. It sometimes involved a large departure, right? The studio to give me the ability to travel to another country and set up one of their best-selling artworks was a great experience, but it was also a show of faith by them. But it was also because I genuinely asked. I said I will do it, right? And if needed, I would stay up long hours. I would come in on weekends. I would make sure I pick up the skill. I would borrow an hour in a week from one of the specialist engineers and be like, can you just sit with me and help me figure out how to draw these paths on a PCB and what's the best thickness I should have. And we'd have loads of these conversations, right? They like talking to somebody who had no idea about the field. But at the same time, maybe what was happening was that I was learning how to connect all these different parts. The product designers would end up creating product drawings of these things, but they had no idea how to make a lot of changes. They could never help the designers or the artists visualize what the product will finally be. The electronics people knew how many lights you can connect at a time, but there was no way for them to connect it to how the artwork and how many lights would fit into an artwork in a sensible space. So as somebody who came from design, I knew how the electronics worked, even if I wasn't the best at doing it. I sort of understood what the software and its limitations were. I sort of knew how the mechanical engineers made stuff. I sort of understood materials. I sort of understood what the artist is thinking. And I kind of got what a designer does. And I knew how to present it because that's what communication design is about. So that put me in an interesting space where I began to sit between teams, between all the different specialists, and sort of like just try and connect everything. So I would have no job titles. My job title on my visa would say some engineer. In my contract offer, it would probably say some kind of a creative technologist. My role on a day-to-day thing when I'm talking to clients would be like, yeah, I'm the designer here and stuff like that. But it was a lot of fun because none of those titles, job description, none of those mattered. It was just sort of having fun, right? At some point, we made something for a children's hospital, like a red ball that just floats around in space, and um, sort of if children are curious, then it comes closer to them, and if they make some violent movements, it sort of goes away in fear. So to talk about like this floating balloon for children who are probably sick, and this is not me. This is the studio working as a collective with some artists who have a creative idea, and then me working in between to help visualize it, and then some industrial designers actually making it. It was great. Yeah, I worked on another project where I just made some very basic casing for some sensors we had. where the studio ended up making these drones float around like a flock of machines that fly around, and they interact with people and so on and so forth. Um, right, and my role in that was just to sort of make the initial 3D model of this so that we could pitch it to funders and raise money for it. When the project began to happen, my role was to just make some casing for the sensors. So very basic mechanical design stuff, right? Aluminum sheets, folding them, cutting them, laser cutting and punching and so on and so forth. But the overall idea, right, as a designer artist, one would understand was that we were talking of machines living among people. This a machine living in a children's hospital, this massive light chandelier, 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters cube, sitting in a museum, let's say the MoMA or the V&A and stuff like that, or in somebody's art collection where people can interact with it. So we were talking about machines living with people, and that was the core idea. So as a designer, I could do anything in that. Didn't matter if I was only sitting and changing batteries on this or teaching interns how to, like, change batteries correctly, because these drones have batteries which, if they fell from the drone and fell on the ground, I think there was some lithium something, they just explode. And the people here would be like, goodbye. So we had to really, really work on the systems. We had to change the batteries every hour on each drone as it came in and went back out. So the overall task, if someone want to look at it, I didn't really have a task, but some of the photography that I ended up doing in the end, for documenting the work that we made. We worked with dancers. This is Wayne McGregor's company, which is like a fabulous bunch of dancers. Wayne McGregor comes in, and he before the performance, he spends about 5 minutes with the dancer and just says, you do this, and it's done. They've never rehearsed this. They just spent 5 minutes for a 30-minute performance, and that was it. That's the level of skill involved in these dancers, and the fact that we had planned for this for a good year and a half to have our drones dance with them. Right? So to sum up that experience working as a designer among artists who do a lot of tech stuff with electronics and mechanical design, it meant that there was no clear role that I was fulfilling. I'm realizing I'm really bad on time, so I'll speed up a bit. But it was very satisfying, right? And this happened to make the chain. I tried being a graphic designer. I realized I really can't cut it, or I'm not as good as some of the cool ones I worked with. I went and worked with a friend startup to sort of boost my ego. We managed to sell the startup, and then I let go of a great career in UX design and went to study, taking a loan. After the loan, I went to work with artists, drawing a salary which doesn't even let me pay back the interest on the loan sometimes. So the debt was killing me, but it was a lot of fun. And after a couple of years of working with them, which incidentally they also offered to move me to Berlin from London, which meant that the whole continent of Europe would be accessible to me and it would be amazing. I just woke up one day and said, no, I'm done. And I walked out. Not because I hated them or something, it just was a feeling. And I was like, I've taken what I can and I've tried to give back, and it's done. I tried finding a job in London. After that, I failed. I had a partner then. We had been looking for a house together and all that stuff. All of that sort of went bust. We discussed getting married, but realized we have too little time before my visa expires. So that's also not going to happen. So in the end, I was back in India and she was stuck in London. I was in India. I tried spending a year trying to build up a business, and it just didn't happen. Just couldn't. But I did get some opportunities. I remember the very old projects I had where I tried to do graphic design that was moving. That kind of stuff. It came back 10 years. This is 2018. This is about 8 to 10 years after I first tried those things. I finally had a client who could trust me to make identities that move, that have logos that they'll actually use in their company that works. So I would make these, like, as a construction company, I would make these proposals for them, and some of them took wind. Right, I would make these presentations about, like, okay, there's greenery and there's water, and then you will build a house and it will be a very sustainable housing, and then people will love living there, and so your logo should be based out of these bricks, and then it's made up of leaves and bricks at the same time, and all that jazz. A lot of storytelling, right? But it was fun. And it worked. One of the clients took it on. I think they completely ruined the implementation, but I don't care. I got to play with it, right? It was still nice. I got to work with a musician in London and make an album cover for him for his 30th anniversary of his production house. I think this is the guy who discovered Bonobo, and also is one of the first electronic music disco whatever scene guys in London, and really cool guy, all around cool guy. And I got to make this album cover for him. Um, During one of my jobs when I was essentially jobless and I was getting kicked out of countries, I was approached by a guy called Nitin Sawhney, who's of Indian origin, and does some music which seems to have themes of migrants and immigration and stuff like that. And they asked me to make some album art for them. Very lame work. You can clearly see that my talent as a graphic designer has not increased. But in the end, it became something that was out in the world. And this was fundamentally when I was stuck between Stockholm, Venice, and Bombay, and the pandemic was ruining all my visa movements. I got to work on somebody who was making an album on immigrants, and it was great. Right? So 10 years too late, but I was doing some graphic design somewhere. The Should I pause? I mean, I can go on forever with stories. I can, but I feel like I should maybe pause and see if there's anyone who has any questions. What do you guys think?
Also, Shobhan, on popular request, could you turn on your video, please?
I'm turning it on. I hate having calls with no. Actually, if some of you guys can turn on videos, will be helpful because also lets me see your expression. That helps me decide if I'm boring you or not. Right now, I have no idea. Right?
It's definitely far from boring. So.
Hmm?
It's far from boring. I think we're getting like.
I'm realizing that I'm actually going through so many stories that I'm not even telling you all half of the fun stuff inside it. It's been so colorful. But the bottom line, I'm at all times I should try and pull back to the idea that everything was very random, right? But it worked out. The graphic design stuff, well, happened 10 years too late, but it happened, right? Nowadays I work as, ironically, I work on UX design. It's every day I'm talking to the guy I work with, and I'm like, I hate this and I really don't want to be in the job, and I'm looking to leave. But every day I'm like, but the problem statement is cool, and we're doing some fun stuff, right? We are working with a lot of data, and we've decided we will not show a single graph. And what we are doing is that we have a lot of conversations. We make fake performances in order to try and imagine what it would be like to see data if you didn't want to have a graph. Right? It comes from done performance design, whatnot along the way that helps you reimagine what even UX design is, and it's fun. So, and the fun part is something you should never let go of, even if the job is like, if you think the job is boring, but if you're enjoying it, do it. But don't do it if you don't enjoy it, is my take. So anyway, when I left London, right, when everything was going to shit, what we decided is that 1 month that I still have on my visa, my then partner and me, we decided that we are going to just do a 1 month tour of Europe. So we went from London to Oslo, where her family was, to Stockholm, where we had some Berlin, where we had some other friends, and Copenhagen, and then from there to Budapest, and then to Greece, and then we spent some 15 days on some island and stuff like that. But in that trip, everywhere we stopped, because I was looking for a job, I would just write to studios and companies and be like, hey. So we were going through, right? And then we end up in Stockholm. And we're staying with some friends, obviously. And one of them is on an interview. And she comes out the interview and she's like, you know what, I'm not going to get this job because I just don't have the technical skills required for it. They're looking for somebody with some engineering background who can do some artsy stuff. And I'm just an artist. And I'm like, And then she looks at me and he's like, you're an engineer, right? And I'm like, no, don't you dare call me an engineer. Like, just don't. That's too insulting for me to take. But yeah, I can try and do some engineering on my side. So she's like, you should totally talk to them. And I said, yeah, I have to talk to them. And she's like, and I'm like, what do they do? And she's like, they're a robotics company. They made a humanoid robot. And I'm like, what? Because I have spent a lot of time trying to talk about robots not being humanoid, right? A lot of my projects in college, the studio I worked with, right? They used to make these drones and orbs and whatnot. They were not humanoid. They were machines that felt like they were alive, but without trying to look like people. And I had a really cool project. I someday maybe I'll play the video or I'll link you all afterwards. But it involved a blanket, right? We were commissioned for a small project by the Science Museum where They were having a humanoid robots exhibition, and we were students, so they were like free labor, children, we'll get ideas, and they gave us this pitch that what will the robots look like? And all the students made different clothings because these are fashion design students clubbed with people like me. Everyone made different clothings and scarves and whatnot, and then thoda bahut electronics dala to the clothes fold up or whatever, some random stuff. And our group went and because in the future we're all going to be really, really lonely, and the loneliness is only increasing with the more and more pervasiveness of technology. So we're not sleeping alone. We need to have some comfort. If you're cold or we're sad, I would imagine a robot to be a blanket. It sleeps with me. When I get cold at night, it covers me up smartly. If it needs to wake me up, it will sort of like poke me and wake me somehow. So this here the blanket. Why don't I have a video? I don't. It's unfortunate, but okay. So that's what a proposal was, and that video did really well. It got me into a little workshop at the MIT Media Lab. It got me a lot of stake when I tried to apply for jobs because people loved it. They loved the behavior of it and how. So this robotics company, for whatever reason, liked it, right? And they were like, yeah, you want to spend some time with us? Come work with us. Very informal, right? Out of the blue, working with a very high-tech humanoid-looking robot with all sorts of motors and contraptions and their own SDK and their own OS that they have written. And I'm like, what? All these words are alien to me. But they offered me the job, but unfortunately I was on tourist visa. And I said, abhi nahi darling, army type thing. Abhi I need to finish my trip. I've got 15 days in Greece to go. Went back to India and tried to make a career in India, right? Didn't work out. Career didn't work out because I had learned no social people skills, being from an IIT as I was. And I just couldn't get into meetings and convince people why they need to give me money to set up a team to do like crazy work. I would always be like, it'll be fun for me. I just had no way to talk the business talk and convince them that तुम्हारे लिए भी अच्छा होगा, तुम पैसा बनाओगे. Everyone would tell me that, you should just pitch it this way and actually they will make money, but I just didn't know how to do it. So I failed. I failed through and through for a whole year. I ended up teaching for a while because isn't that what people do when they fail in the industry? They teach, right? That's what we've been made to believe, but hey, that's wrong. Okay, some people are really good and they can teach well. But at the end, I just gave up and I said like, okay, and I wrote to the Swedish company and I'm like, hey guys, do you still want me? It's been a year, but der hai durust hai. And they were like, yeah, come on board. So I went to Stockholm, started working there. Did some cool stuff, right? They've made robots, right? And the robots do a lot of stuff, a lot of really fun stuff. But when they make the robot smile, see on the left is what they did. The robot just smiled, right? On the right is sort of like what I tried to do. The only difference I made is that the neck moves. Why? Because as somebody who, let's say, so-called designer or so-called person who actually looks at people for a living sometimes, I notice that when people smile, they don't just smile. Their neck moves, their body leans forward, right? Their eyes change. So my suggestion to them was that if you're making a robot that looks like a person, but it's definitely creeping the hell out of people who look at it, actually behave a bit more. So these rich nuances were what I got to work as. So again, my title was something, I don't even remember what, I think it was interaction designer. There were days when I was writing C# code. There were days when I was just making blockly visual programming. There were days when I was sitting down with the mechatronics engineers and we were figuring out how a motor, sort of how the firmware for a motor should be written. And sometimes you're talking about how we will handle this data so that it doesn't, like end up compromising the people we are looking at, because we are recording people, right? There's a camera on the robot. We have people's videos. If we compromise it, we're in for a load of pain. So the conversations ranged all over the place. We ended up making really nice demos in Dubai and in Stockholm. I think it also went somewhere in the States. I don't remember. But where people could just come and buy stuff from the robot by just showing a QR code on their phone, and the whole interaction, right, was a lot of fun to make, and it was great to be involved in something like this. I still squarely believe that there should not be humanoid robots, but while working with this robotics company, I got to do a lot of stuff in the details of planning, in making a storyboard, right, imagining the whole process in which people will go through a user journey or an experience flow. So all of those skills in design did come to help. But unfortunately, about 6 months in, I got fired because I felt like one of the co-founders was not doing a good job, and I was stupid enough to say it. The minute I said it, 2 days later, walking papers, and I am gone. Again, when you're abroad, if you get fired, you have a couple of months to find a job. So it's really hard. You don't always get it. And this was the end of. The best part, though, is that I was replaced by a magician, a legit magician who's won the Europe's Got Talent, whatever contest that they have. Right? You have the India's Got Talent award. This guy won Europe's Got Talent as a magician, and he's the guy who replaced me. So I am like the happiest person in the world that मुझे निकाला तो मुझे replace and he's really good. So look him up if you guys want. He's got really cool work, and he does a lot of stuff with high tech. So he does stuff with robots and iPads and stuff like that. So it might even be up your alley since you all are engineers. Charlie K-pop. So and this was a time. This was literally the end of 2020, and which meant the end of 2019. And I had to find a job urgently because, again, my partner and me were looking for a house in Stockholm, and we were considering some long-term stuff. So I needed to stay there, right? Can't once again come back to India, and that's that. So here there's a story about a company that approached me when I was originally working with this robotics company. I had applied to them for a job many years earlier, but the HR process is really slow. So I was already working in Stockholm when they reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to interview?" And I said, "Okay, why not? I mean, I'm already employed, I'm happy, and I think it's unethical for me to talk to others, but I'm happy to have a chat. I have certain rules. If you fulfill those rules, then I will be willing to inform my current company that I cannot work with you anymore." For the rules might be things like, if you offer me 3 times the salary, then I cannot say no. But if you offer me just a marginal raise, then I will be true to and loyal to who I work with and stuff like that. We started having a conversation, and at some point, I remember them asking me, "What's your current salary?" And I said, "There is no way I can tell you that." And they're like, "But that's what the industry norm is." And I said, "That doesn't matter. I don't believe that I need to tell you what somebody else has currently judged me to be worth for you to assign a worth to me." And the HR person was really thankful. She was like, "This is really nice. I'm glad that you say this. I'm still bound by sort of like my requirements and my role and in the industry here, but I respect what you say." And I was like, "It's fine. It's okay." And I didn't. We let the process end there, and that was that. It was about a month or two later that I got fired from Stockholm. And I was like, shit. So I wrote to them and I said, "Okay, guys, now I'm desperate. Now I'll tell you my salary. I'll tell you everything about me. You want on my waist size, you get it. But please, I need to have a job because I need to stay in Europe somehow and stuff like that." And they said, "Okay, fine." And we proceeded. And in all the interviews, I talked about my model stance and all that. There's loads of things. But the fact is, I ended up getting the job, and it was in Venice. So I was like, great. I'm going to go to Venice, and I'm going to live by the sea and also cycle around everywhere, and it'll be great. Came back to India to get visa paperwork done, and the pandemic hit. The embassy shut down, the paperwork never got done, and I realized that I've got family members I need to attend to in the pandemic. So ended up sort of staying in India. My partner was in India when India began to shut down, and then we had to get her out on the last flight. To send her back to Europe because there was a lot of talk about Indians and politicians talking about how foreigners are brought it to India, and we were quite concerned of having a foreigner here and the kind of mob violence we began to see in the country. Then it was not something happy, so we sent her back, and all that happened. In the pandemic, the visa paperwork didn't happen, so I lost that job also. I lost my Swedish job. I was back in India with a skill set that no one can use because we don't make humanoid robots or drone-based artworks or stuff that talks about war and the death of innocent people as much. And we definitely don't do any of this stuff at an industrial scale. So there's not that much money in it. And I still had a debt, right, from my college days to pay out. So there's a lot of figuring out what the hell to do. But in that time, somebody had come across a post by me on LinkedIn that talked about all this confusion that I experienced about what is my job title and stuff like that. And she reached out through a recruiter, and she was working for McDonald's at that time. I can't show any of the work we did, but they offered me a job that basically ended up paying my entire college tuition in about 3 months of work, right? Out of nowhere, because she said that McDonald's has recently acquired a company for several $1 million that does a specific task, and they've tried to make this machine that interacts with people and all that stuff and tries to automate a lot of the ordering processes through robots. But people are not really taking up to it. So what can we do that can probably make it more human or humane as an experience? And for whatever reason, she felt like all of these past experiences, like all this random jazz that had happened, might help them in the project. Now, this is a product that technically is very sophisticated, and they have the best engineers, linguists, computational linguists, NLU design, whatever stuff you want to throw at it. They have literally all the money in the world to throw at them, and they couldn't fix it. And for some reason, they thought maybe I can help. And for a product that scales, you end up earning a lot of money in a very short time, but only for a short time. So I was brought on board. I said, okay, why not? Because they were offering me 7 times the current salary I was drawing in India. So I had to say yes, and I had to tell my employers. My employers were like, yeah, man, obviously take it. And I worked with them for a few months, and about 3 months later, the company passed a directive that anyone working on sensitive stuff should not be in the US. And I'm like, pandemic chal raha hai, main Bombay mein hu, I don't have a US work permit, I can't do it, and they let me go. But the 3 months were really good because it sort of validated the fact that you don't necessarily need to have done exactly that step by step by step. There was no logical process that would have got me to the job description that I was working on, right? So for me, that was crucial, that it's okay to not have followed a linear path to get there. We are on time, damn it. Anyway, so the pandemic happened, this small job happened, and then I did stuff, and then I realized that it's more fun to blow money instead of earning it and do stuff that you enjoy. So I try and do a day job, and on the side, I do a lot of other stuff that interests me. Some of my old work, which was about trying to do graphic design through code, this was done in 2011 or 12, when I was teaching my cousin how trees look different in different parts of the country depending on rainfall or wind speed or whatever that there is. To trying to turn, in the pandemic, try and turn some of my artwork, which are very spatial, into website based, so you could see it on a web page because everyone was looking at screens. To trying to look at the pandemic. So, in the pandemic, a lot of people made a lot of graphs that were like, oh, these many people are dying here and whatnot. Or in your city, 3,000 people are infected with COVID right now. And I was like, yeah, but it's like, it doesn't make sense. In Bombay, you've got 25 million people. And we sat down and we started creating where we would have like 10,000 people on the screen, and we'd say the blue dot is you. If your city has got this number of COVID infected cases, this is the distribution of them. So we tried to change the way we talked about COVID. It was not through fear, and it was not through death. And it was not even to say that that's not a lot. It was just to say this is what the reality is, so you can talk about it, right? We tried to take graphs and charts and which make these visuals and turn them into 3D forms. Just play, right? We try to at some point. Oh, I don't have it shown. Damn it! Wait, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'll share another screen with you guys. But I'm also realizing at the end of the talk, so you guys interrupt me if you want to. Okay? I'll show you this one thing. So that project that I was talking about. Let's go here and here, right? We had graphs about data that was talking about whatever. We tried to make 3D models. We made pretty 3D models of it. We started to imagine what it will look like. So we 3D print little bits, and we like, oh, if we had data that we could actually stand and look around. In the end, this ended up going to the World Expo in Dubai. The Swedish, so World Expo is apparently the place where all the biggest industrial things come together and try and demonstrate the cool tech that they have made. And this entire process, the project that we did, right, where we then 3D printed these models that we had made, which had data of different kinds on, let's say, women's rights in Sweden, or they are not wasting natural resources and whatnot. This was a team in the pandemic, that me sitting in Bombay, a girl in Bangalore, a guy sitting in Stockholm, another guy sitting in some other city in Sweden, another guy sitting in a forest in Sweden, together collaboratively made where we had a robot, a robot that's huge, like 3-4 meters tall, that 3D printed by using sawdust as a material, so as sustainable as you can make it, and 3D printed objects that ended up being wooden sculptures, right? In order to talk about things like the Swedish society's sort of interest in democracy or foreign aid, or their reliance on natural resources and not using coal and petroleum and so on and so forth. And it sat there in the expo for 6 months, right? So the idea was that things that I was just playing with ended up becoming real world things, and then they ended up involving 3D printers, robots, cross collaboration, with one of the guys being a musician, one of the guys being one of the founding members of Gapminder, I think. Gapminder is, you guys should look it up. The guy, I think, won some Nobel Prize in economics or something. I don't know, something to do with it. Right? And the the net result was not from one field of work, right? And I think that was great. So even though there's not been a linear process to get to where I am, I've been very lucky that I've got to work on stuff that brings together different fields. And that's not happened because if I did it linearly, no one would give me a chance. In a job, if I'm a UX designer, my next task would be UX design, maybe a little management. But the ability to, have that, I would say it's courage to some extent, because I was a fool. But foolishness and courage are probably closely related. That you should have the courage to be like, what I want to do, I will do. And eventually in life, I will find a way to connect them together. Because when you connect stuff, you can make really cool shit. Right? Okay, I'm gonna stop it there and call it a day. I ended up speaking for an hour. Yeah, people are free to contact if they want to. I'm insanely approachable usually. So,
We've linked your LinkedIn account and your website's URL and all of the posts and all of the messages that we've circulated, so you guys can like reach out to him on that. And it was a really great talk show. And I mean, I don't think we could have gotten this sort of a perspective from anywhere else. And even though your journey has been like ups and peaks, but you're happy with what you're doing, and I think that's what matters. So
yeah, I think that's what matters. So yeah, cool. I'm hoping it's not a complete waste of time for you guys, and glad to have spent some time with you all and heard stories of IIT Guwahati. So yeah, cheers, guys.